Numéro 2, C-45.
Number 2, C-45.
Madam Speaker. Honourable Senators, I rise today to speak to C-45, an act respecting cannabis, and to amend the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, the Criminal Code and other acts. I want to begin by commending Senator Galvez for her very thoughtful and science-based analysis of the public policy and health implications of this important bill, and I thank her for acknowledging the special situation of Aboriginal people, which has not yet been much discussed or examined. I agree entirely with the recommendation that the government must put health considerations at the forefront by adopting a real and not theoretical public health approach without promoting intentionally or unintentionally the emergence of an economic sector through legalization attractive to many to support an existing risky practice. Today I hope to give you some insights as to why this recommendation applies to Nunavut. Nunavut is not ready. Senator Galvez is right. C-45 is a complete repeal of prohibition with absence of regulations. It transfers the majority of the responsibilities of legalization to the provinces, in my case a territory, which in turn may transfer those responsibilities to unprepared municipalities. In Nunavut, this is a very rushed process due to several factors. Firstly, Nunavut elected a new territorial government on October 30, 2017. The previous government made a decision not to deal with this issue beyond conducting an online anonymous survey on attitudes towards legalization, which I believe provides the government of Nunavut with a baseline but does not constitute meaningful consultation as this legislation warrants. The new government was not formed until November 2017 and has only just begun working on this major social issue. The government has announced a series of community consultations which will see public meetings held in only 11 of Nunavut's 25 communities and began in late January and will continue until late February. The Nunavut Association of Municipalities put the subject of cannabis legalization on the agenda of their annual meeting in Iqaluit in early December 2017. And as a federal parliamentarian, I was invited to attend and participate. Honourable Senators, there was a litany of concerns. No one in the room welcomed this legislation. The bill has been described by the federal government as representing transformative social change. Nowhere may this be more dramatic, I fear, than in remote communities in the far north. I found community mayors and officials to have great concerns about the apparent rush to implement the new legal regime, complaining about not having been consulted whatsoever, about not having the resources to enact bylaws and policies they may well wish to put in place. They also lamented the absence of mental health supports in their communities and the complete absence of any alcohol and drug treatment facilities anywhere in Nunavut. How will we treat residents and employees who may become addicted without community mental health or territorial addiction programs, they asked. Mayors had many questions about what powers they might be given to govern their own affairs. Can we prohibit the use of marijuana in our communities, some asked, in the same way that many communities have implemented controls on the use of alcohol or outright prohibition following community plebiscites, a procedure allowed under Nunavut's Liquor Act? Will communities be able to regulate the age of possession, given their strong concerns about the effects of marijuana use amongst vulnerable youth, who are already in alarming numbers absent from school and displaying serious mental health issues associated with violent crime? Armed standoffs, sadly, are now commonplace in remote communities in Nunavut, depression, and suicide. What powers will communities have to regulate retail sales and the use of marijuana in public places? Will funds be available to assist communities in the complex task of drafting bylaws and the development of workplace policies? The mayors got a briefing from lawyers from a Yellowknife law firm who suggested that the legalization of marijuana need not represent significant change, that it can be dealt with the way municipalities and governments already deal with cigarette smoking. That glib assertion clearly did not provide comfort to the mayors at the meeting. The lawyers' advice clearly raised concern. They were told Municipalities can further restrict the use of marijuana by bylaw. You may wish to enact bylaws to prohibit use on schools or playgrounds. You could also prohibit use in public buildings or in staff housing. Also, that could be a term for the use of land or other commercial contracts. It is unknown, they were told, whether the government of Nunavut will enact a law requiring a plebiscite to approve or restrict local use. But the legislation will allow online sales, the mayors were told. So there will be a lot of marijuana in circulation, it was forecasted. You should have an updated drug and alcohol policy if you have one, they were told. Get one if you don't. You'll also need guidelines for medical use, such as the employer's need to know, the employer's duty to disclose. They were advised on the principles for such policies, how to deal with disciplinary issues. They were advised on the human rights implications of bylaw making and how a municipal employer must allow treatment of employee addictions. Honourable Senators, these municipal mayors are crucial levels of government in the scattered, remote communities of the Arctic. They already have their hands full in dealing with water and sewer, roads, garbage, dogs, in the harshest climate in the world. Many of them have very small populations and are struggling with capacity to deal with an increasingly complex world. They're now going to have to engage lawyers from distant places to help them develop bylaws and policies for legislation which they fear will become law imminently. Who will pay for this? Who will train our bylaws or the RCMP, they asked. Here's what some of the mayors said about those issues. Mayor of Resolute Bay, population 198 in 2016. My concern is for my community. Today we're hearing that it'll be okay, that we can deal with it. This is not true. 10-year-olds are using and skipping school. We'll need help. Also, when it is legal, like cigarette smoking in public places, people don't follow that rule. How far from a building you can smoke. Nobody listens to that. Just an example. It will come with problems like enforcement, employees, bylaws, not enough funding. The government of Nunavut should ask for more funding from the federal government since they are making it a law. We have no choice but to go with it when it is legal. Who will enforce it? The GN or municipalities? It's almost like we're going backwards, she said, run by a government that was colonizing us years ago. Resolute Bay is part of Canada. We see problems firsthand. We know our communities. Many people are impoverished. Many people are already dealing with these illegal products. We have concerns about our children. Mayor of Talojuak, it'll be a challenge. 7 months is not a long time to prepare. Age limits and so on. We need to look at our bylaws. Those of us in the territory will need an awful lot of support. Mayor of Johaven, we mayors will need to be doing a lot of work. If by July 1st we don't have a plan past that date, that'll be a problem. We don't have bylaw enforcers, bylaws in place. We need more funding for the enforcement of the bylaws. Honourable Senators, having heard the strong and thoughtful concerns of the mayors of Nunavut about this federal legislation being imposed in Nunavut, I promised then and there to give voice to the concerns of Nunavut community leaders in the Senate. This was an impetus for me to plan to travel to every one of Nunavut's 25 communities in the next 2 months, mostly during break weeks, although I will be away next week. I'll begin my travel with town hall meetings and meetings with mayors and council next week in South Baffin, then the 7 communities in the Western Kitikmeot region. The Mayor of Talojuak said, "It is very clear at the NAM meeting. No one has talked to us. Who will hear our concerns? You have to come to our communities." So I'll be armed with more information and a better identification of concerns and recommended solutions when I return. But in speaking to the principles of the bill today, I want to signal what I've already heard and expect to hear. Now, I've spoken about this in question period already, but Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated spoke loudly and clearly at their annual general meeting last year about the solemn legal obligation under the Nunavut Land Claim Agreement, Article 32, that requires governments to consult with Inuit on social policy changes. Consultation with the National Inuit Organization based in Ottawa does not meet this constitutionally protected statutory obligation. The president of ITK has publicly stated that a few conversations with his organization is not adequate. In fact, that duty is owed to each comprehensive claimant group in Inuit Nunangat. Yet this week, in her appearance before the Senate, Minister Pettipas Taylor cited meetings with ITK as evidence of the government's consultation with Inuit. I'd like to share with you other specific concerns identified by mayors. The mayor of Johaven said, how is it going to help by legalizing marijuana in small communities where it's already bad enough? Keep in mind, honourable senators, that yes, marijuana use is widespread in Nunavut communities. Anyone who's campaigned door to door, as I've done often over many years, knows this. But there are natural barriers to the widespread use of marijuana now in place by virtue of the North's isolation. In Iqaluit, where I live, with daily jet service and a huge population of around 8,000 people, marijuana costs, I understand, about $20 a gram. The Hells Angels or other criminal organizations are probably not present there. Those suppliers from southern communities undoubtedly have those connections. But in the more remote communities where there are intermittent scheduled flights over long distances, prices for a gram of marijuana can easily reach $50 per gram. What will happen when marijuana can be ordered online and mailed for a price of $10 per gram? Education. The mayor of Qikiqtarjuaq said, there are users under 12 years of age. They have dropped out of school. That is a concern. Attendance in schools in Nunavut is a serious problem. On any day of the week, inside an average Nunavut school, you might find only 7 students attending class for every 10 who are actually enrolled. And the rate of attendance is dropping, not improving. And Nunavut students generally only attend until grade 7. Students in grade 10 and 11 only average about just over 50%. The mayor of Arctic Bay told the meeting, we created our own government so we can be more independent, but rights we fought for are being degraded. I've witnessed a 6-year-old stealing drugs from their parents. I'm not ready for this. There are too many problems we're facing now without it being legal. Honourable Senators, Nunavut's also currently struggling with a lack of alcohol and drug treatment options. The Chief Justice of Nunavut's Court of Justice says that 90% of the crime in the territory is linked to alcohol. He said he and other judges send people out of the territory for treatment, but that can be costly. It's not always culturally sensitive, and it doesn't treat the whole family. It's not cost-effective, he said, to rely solely on jails, when we really need some interventions at a family level, at a community level, to address a growing problem of substance abuse in Nunavut. The mayor of Arctic Bay echoed these concerns at the meeting in December. Now that we have alcohol, we were starting to get used to alcohol. Now we have an additional challenge. The older generation is really intimidated. If it was available when illegal, imagine it if it is legal. I have friends and families whose minds have been degraded by cannabis. I'm concerned about the next generation being adversely affected by the use of cannabis. Even if prohibited, our experience with alcohol prohibition is that there's still a lot of alcohol. Mayor of Primero, Population 389, followed by saying, we are being burdened with additional challenges. Our young people will be addicted for sure. Good hunters are affected. They are not going out hunting. The mayor of Pagnertung displayed alarm. Users are getting lazy. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to work. It's bad enough with cigarettes. They keep taxing it, but nobody stops. And by the way, Nunavut has the highest rate of smoking in the country. 2/3 of residents already smoke cigarettes. Now, Senator Galvez presented scientific evidence to support her concern. We must have scientific evidence of the links between educational achievement and cannabis use. And there are studies that show that rates of attainment are linked to cannabis use. Early cannabis use, an Australian study said, appears to be associated with the adoption of an anti-conventional lifestyle characterized by affiliations with delinquent and substance-using peers and the precocious adoption of adult roles, including early school leaving, leaving the parental home, and early parenthood. People are worried about mental health impacts of cannabis on a vulnerable population. The mayor of Pagnerton linked the issue of marijuana on mental health struggles in the territories. We've seen people, he said, that started to become schizophrenic. When we hear there won't be much change, they're wrong. There will be a huge impact. Mayor of Arctic Bay said, we don't have alcohol and drug institutions. Where are we going to send them? Nunavut doesn't have what we need. They all have to go south. There should be...
Would you like 5 more minutes?
I would like 5 minutes.
Honourable Senators, are you in?
There should be a rehab in Nunavut, he said. The mayor of Resolute Bay talked about the challenge of time. 7 months is not a long time to prepare. There is evidence that cannabis use does impact psychotic or affective mental health outcomes. I won't mention the suicide problem in detail in Nunavut. It's sadly well known. In fact, one study showed that the rate of suicide amongst young men in Nunavut is the highest in the world, and the rates are 10 times the national average. Is there a link between cannabis use and depression and suicide? I've seen some evidence, a study undertaken in New Zealand, that said cannabis use is associated with increased rates of a range of adjustment problems in adolescence, young adulthood, crime, depression, and suicidal behaviors, with these adverse effects being most evident for school-aged regular users. Honourable Senators, I'm struck in looking at these issues by how little we know. We don't know the extent of marijuana use in Nunavut. We don't know about the effects this drug may have on mental health amongst Aboriginal people. And I want to say that I was really amazed that the Government of Canada has confirmed it to be the case that we don't know the answer to a lot of these questions. MP Minister Blair announced in January that Canada is going to begin to address what he described as certain knowledge gaps in this area, with a paltry investment of $1.4 million to fund 14 research projects across Canada. The research project is expected to lay a foundation to develop further studies on the broader impacts of non-medical cannabis legalization and regulation in Canada, and help inform the ongoing development of policies, practices, and programs involving cannabis. I'm surprised, frankly, Honourable Senators, that a government which has promised to make public policy decisions based on science is only now beginning, on the eve of legalization, to do study on the health, behavioral, social, and economic implications of legalization of marijuana. Now, finally, I want to say that when I listened to the ministers during Committee of the Whole on Tuesday, it struck me how much of an emphasis was placed on the findings of the Task Force on Cannabis Legalization and Regulation. However, at the task force presentation to senators last fall, Chairman McClellan was very clear that the task force felt that more education and consultation was required. Meaningful engagement cannot happen in 5 months on what has been touted as a transformative social change. It's especially true in my region with its remote communities, very high proportion of Inuit whose first language is not English or French. Finally, I think we need to clearly take more time to do this properly, at least in my region where the new territorial government has barely begun consultations. Canadians also must be provided with facts about cannabis and its effects, this task force recommended. I urge the committee or committees studying this bill to obtain the best information about the health and mental health impacts of marijuana on youth and particularly on Aboriginal people. Thank you.
Senator Bayak, do you have a question?
Senator Batters.
Senator Patterson, do you accept the questions? Batters, sorry.
Yes.
Yes, would Senator Patterson take a brief question?
Yes.
Thank you. Something that's been very concerning to me, and particularly after I hear your speech, is the fact that C-45 will allow every household to be able to grow 4 plants of unknown size, could be 4 huge marijuana plants in every household. Given the remoteness of your particular territory and the disparate population, can you please tell us about the impact of that will be had on Nunavut?
Do you require more time, Senator Patterson, to understand, to answer Senator Batter's question?
I'll answer it as briefly as I can, but yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Honourable Senator. You know, I guess what I was saying is that I won't pretend that marijuana use is not occurring in Nunavut communities, although I don't think it's as extensive as it is in the cities that have been discussed so far in this bill. One of the reasons for that is that Nunavut is, perhaps one could say, blessed by remoteness and transportation logistics and the costs. And that has resulted in difficulty in accessing alcohol and illegal drugs. But now, so the mayors are very concerned and made it very clear, and I'm trying to be their voice here in this chamber, that they're concerned about the proliferation of this, what they consider dangerous substance, especially for youth who aren't going to school, hunters who are not so motivated to get up in the morning and go hunting, and people who are working in our growing mineral sector, where there are stringent drug tests that would prevent them from getting jobs. So they mentioned this business of being able to grow plants and felt that that was yet another way in which easier access, as well as being able to buy online from anywhere, would result in the proliferation of what they consider a dangerous substance on top of the alcohol issues they're dealing with, on top of the school attendance issues we're struggling with, on top of the mental health and suicide issues. The alarming comments from the mayors, I have to bring these to the attention of the Senate because they asked me to be their voice and they feel nobody's listening. Thank you.
Senator Joyal, s'il vous plaît. Sorry?
Senator Joyal.
Sure, he can answer.
Senator Joyal would like to ask a question. Senator
Would you-
Patterson, would you accept another question?
Yes, if there's time.
Thank you.
I'll no, allez-y.
Thank you. I would like to ask you a question, Senator Patterson. You have outlined to this chamber this afternoon my worst fears. And that's why, since the beginning of this debate, I raised the issue of the impact of the legalization on the Aboriginal community. You might have heard me before, and I asked questions to the government leader for us to listen to the Minister of Crown and Indian Relation and Minister of Indian Services, the other minister, because I think that we have a moral responsibility to listen to the Aboriginal peoples and to those who know their reality, to, I should say, share the impact of what will happen, what we suspect will happen, and what we know will happen with the legalization of marijuana. And my major concern is that the consultation with the Aboriginal people should have taken place and should take place, and I will say it, with the greatest respect for the government, that there should be a special regime and a special way of dealing with the objective of this bill in relation to the Aboriginal people. And in my personal opinion is that if we don't do that, we will add to the plight of the Aboriginal people with the social nightmare that you have outlined this afternoon. So my specific question to you is, when you mention in your speech that there was consultation with ITQ. Could you expand the kind of consultation that took place, or if it was a social gathering with a cup of coffee and a general discussion, or was it a real consultation with the objective, the impact, the way that the plan could be implemented, the police forces, the health services, the social support, and all the implications that are involved into the changes that will bring to the Nunavut community?
Senator Patterson, you have 24 seconds.
The president of ITK said the consul. Well, I've got 24
He has
seconds.
24 seconds left on his 5 minutes.
Very quick answer. The president of ITK said they had a few conversations that were not adequate.
Senator Dick, I'm sorry, there's 6 seconds left.
Would the honourable senator ask for more time so I could ask a question? It's an important issue.
Senator Dick. Order, please. Senator Dick's going to ask her question.
Thank you. I want to commend the senator for his speech. I thought he did a very good job of bringing forth to the chamber the reactions from the local people in Nunavut, the mayors and so on. And I too am concerned about the effect of marijuana legislation on Aboriginal youth. And when we traveled there, you and I remember quite clearly, went into a number of the homes, and the homes are really, really crowded. So I don't know whether this came up during the discussions, whether there was fear about normalizing cannabis use, because you're in homes where there's 2 or 3 families, and let's say it's the parents as opposed to the teenagers that are taking it up, and then the whole family sees that as normal behavior, especially considering the high rates of smoking that you mentioned.
Senator Patterson, and then it'll be over.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Indeed, there was several hours of discussion at the mayor's meeting, and I've only indicated some of the highlights. But there was a big concern expressed about having plants in houses, in small, overcrowded houses. And there's no limit on the height of these plants. There was a concern expressed about that. There was also a concern expressed about being able to regulate smoking the way cigarette smoking is regulated, as the lawyers from Yellowknife said could easily be done. Mayors were very concerned about prohibiting use in homes, about trying to prohibit use on school playgrounds and in public spaces. So absolutely. And that's why I believe that we should hear from the minister responsible for consultations with Aboriginal peoples, whoever that might be, and it may not be Minister Bennett, I understand. And we should hear from the Minister Philpott, who has a responsibility with Indigenous people, for Indigenous peoples, and see how these concerns might be dealt with in this legislation. Thank you.
I don't think so. I think you're going to be testing the chamber's patience, Senator Dick. I'm sorry. We've had no on this side several times. Sénatrice Petitpas? Petitclerc.
Senator Petitclerc. Well, I would simply like to take the adjournment in my name. The Honourable Senator Petitclerc moves, is seconded by the Honourable Senator Dick, that debate be continued at the next sitting of the Senate. Is it your pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion?